I'm John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our friends. Turn off our cell phones and get away. Night or day, it's John DeSando on the radio. We'll watch the credits roll.
Cinema Classics is produced and hosted by John DeSando. Listen to shows Thursday at 8:01 p.m. on WCBE 90.5 FM, and listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando,
I'm Audrey Harkonen.
and this is Cinema Classics. Now, for people who aren't watching our video, unfortunately, they're unable to see that wardrobe has fitted me out in a completely blue outfit. Now, you don't think they're trying to make a political statement, do you, after this election? You smartly in one all black, can't identify you. But anyway, it's just, I'm sure wardrobe wasn't even thinking when they put me in this outfit.
Nope.
But we have gone a bit political because of our election last week.
And what we've chosen to
Yeah.
review here,
Yeah, what is it?
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yeah, and talk about a cinema classic.
Oh,
Wow.
absolutely. It's a treasure. It is an absolute treasure.
Now, can you see why we've selected this?
I sure can. In many regards, I can see.
It is.
Good choice.
With the triumph of Donald Trump, certainly an amazing feat. Any way you look at it, you don't have to buy into whatever, but just for a human being to come back like that is amazing. So it doesn't, the parallel doesn't fit in the sense that James Stewart, let's say, as they call him at that point,
Yes,
plays a greenhorn going to Washington.
right.
And Trump is no greenhorn returning to Washington.
That is true. That is very, very true.
However, are there any verities in this? Are there any truths that Frank Capra, whom I know we'll talk a bit about surely when we get to our podcast, any truths, Audrey, in this that they can pull us out of looking at the recent Trump triumph and just look at elections in general?
I think that most importantly, we have in this illustration of the goings-on in Washington, we've got a young idealistic senator who goes head-to-head with numerous older, less idealistic senators that are already there. In other words, he learns, Mr. Smith learns, government by the people is rather than government by the people, it's government by the elite for the money. And I think that is a lesson that has resonated today.
Oh, I do, and you're reminding me that we have yet to see the influence of Elon Musk on Trump.
Yeah.
There you're talking about the richest man in the world.
Yes.
So
exactly.
there's going to be influence there. He certainly helped Trump's triumph with hundreds of millions of dollars
Yes.
in campaign contributions. And he will probably be, at least Trump predicts that he will be, influential in the fiscal responsibilities
Right.
of the presidency.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right. That even doesn't even nod to the number of wealthy people who have financed campaigns.
Right. And I think it illustrates, Mr. Smith illustrates that an entire state, according to this film, an entire state is pretty much run by one individual, uniquely named James Taylor. Taylor, yeah, that's Edward Arnold.
Yes.
He literally owns the state, the media, and at the time it's the newspapers and it's the radio. And he turns, or appears to turn the tide on this poor, young, innocent, naive senator from his state.
You're so right. Arnold is perfect for this.
He's perfect.
He somewhat reminds me of the Barrymore in It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who runs the town.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
both the guys, portly older guys, but powerful in that way.
And from banking, running and owning a bank and properties in It's a Wonderful Life to
Yes.
owning the media.
Yeah, media,
Yes,
there's
it's-
even more appropriate.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And that is what poor Jimmy Stewart is up against, or Jeff Smith is up against.
Yes, right. He gets there by a fluke. A
Correct.
senator from the unknown state.
It is.
It's never identified, Audrey,
No,
don't tell me.
it's not identified. It's not
Are you
identified.
thinking Minnesota or somewhere?
No, actually, the storyline comes from Montana.
Ah,
And it is loosely based on an experience of Burton Wheeler, who was a very new senator.
look at you
from-
with all your research.
Well, yeah, you know I will. Burton Wheeler was a new senator, and it was during the Harding administration in the 1920s. And Burton Wheeler's fight, his uphill battle in Washington when he first arrives, is Harding does not want to prosecute any of the Teapot Dome
Oh, I remember that,
conspirators.
yeah.
Yes, and Wheeler was very instrumental in changing that.
Yeah. So in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Frank Capra, the director,
Yes.
best characterized by his tag Capricorn.
Oh, you stole my line.
Did I really?
That was my line.
Well, they also say Capra-esque.
Yes. Well, now they've because he is so revered, he's Capra-esque. But at the time, in the 30s and 40s, it was Capricorn.
Know why?
It was a model about the underdog, the kind of loser or just ordinary person, and those were both men and women because he has a couple of women in characters too, that battle against a larger, more ominous group, whether it's in government or whether it's in banking or whether it's in the media and newspapers. And they overcome, they succeed, they win, and that's why it's Capricorn, because in the end, these little people have to win.
And if you see this, you have to be amused by some of the montages in the, when Jeff comes to Washington, he takes off by himself.
Yes, yes, yes.
He goes past all the monuments.
Tours, landmarks of DC, the musical score, both patriotic and also sappy. It just sets the tone for his awe and his appreciation and his belief in the sanctity of this place and the system.
And yes, and he stands in front of Lincoln's memorial.
Oh, yeah.
And Lincoln just dominates that shot.
Exactly.
And Jeff is just happy as heck to be there.
Right.
And to be a servant of the people.
Yes,
And
yes.
it's a good image with Lincoln there.
Yeah. Until the press gets a hold of him, and he is not familiar with what the press will do to you, turns around in a day, turns him into a buffoon.
Yes.
And misquotes him and takes awful photos of him and turns him into a stooge.
Yeah,
He was a
and
stooge.
it's that you and I are appreciators of the editing techniques that make great movies.
Yes,
It's so
exactly.
easy to see how you could take a greenhorn like him
Uh-huh.
and
And make a fool out of it.
and make a fool out of him in just his starry-eyed wonder at something that we should still be starry-eyed
Yeah.
and wondered about. Well, we've become jaded.
Yes.
And this last election will show you how jaded we've become. It's nice to remember, at least when we were kids, that this was a great ideal.
Yes.
Our country, and certainly when I was growing up, and not so much you, as the world got more cynical.
Yeah.
After I, left my youth and getting into my teenage and so on, the world began to change, and it wasn't quite as easy to be as chauvinistic as we were, or just as so starry-eyed
Yeah.
about America the Great, and we are, as we can see, we are moving toward isolationism. There's no question about that,
That's true.
and we are no longer going to be. It would be my prediction, we are no longer going to be the world leader that we
Yeah,
once were.
on the world stage,
Yeah.
we're not going to have that leadership position.
Yeah, so this movie's gonna seem more outrageous to our young people.
Yes, yes.
But I do love those parts, they are tearjerker parts.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And when he is waiting to hear, he's on the Senate floor, the filibuster has
Oh.
begun, and he's waiting to hear from his home state. And because Jim Taylor has the media, all the telegrams that come flying in are against Jeff Smith and what he's doing. And he's so crestfallen.
Yes.
And he's so torn up about it. And he just has such a hard time believing. But then he hangs on to that saying that, you know, only lost causes are worth fighting for.
I think that you mentioned the filibuster. This is a good segment, at least in that you should show every new senator.
Yes.
Steer them away. Now, I think they have rules in place now, don't they, to curb?
I'm
I
not
think
sure.
there has to be it's kind of a vote to let that thing sustain.
Yeah.
But I think it's different from what it was here. But here will strike fear in your heart
Right.
as to once a senator gets that floor, he doesn't have to yield that. He can yield it to questions,
Right.
but he doesn't have to give up his floor until he dies.
Yes.
So it's really a scary business. So I think both sides have kind of looked at that askance at the filibuster. But you can see where, well, it might have been necessary.
Right.
And the way Capra depicts it here
Yes.
it really takes that movie down.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm thinking too, Audrey? The images of James Stewart. In most shots, he is like heads taller than anybody else.
That is true. He is a very, very
And he
tall
is very
man
tall,
in,
yes.
in real life, but the sort of the upshot
Yes,
is keeps him very tall and
Yes.
very straight. And yeah, he's the savior.
He's heads above anybody else. And I thought that was interesting because in further films, you're not as aware of how tall he is. He's got to be at least 6'4".
Yeah.
And because the way the camera doesn't care,
Right.
it'll depict you whatever it wants.
Yeah.
So as you say, you take the low angle shots for him in this, and he dominates others as the idealist.
Right.
Well, you have him in further films, even in Rear Window, we don't even see his height.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And that's part of the debilitation of our
Uh-huh.
character, our emasculation of our character.
Right.
But Stewart, this is his, right, and that's another thing we have to talk about, Audrey. And I think we need to talk about this in our podcast. What year is this, Audrey?
It's 1936.
Is it?
I think 1936.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and what's interesting, which we'll talk more in the podcast, is 1936 and how much has changed
Yes.
and how much has not changed.
Yes.
And the similarities of the inner workings of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and I'd like us to get into a little bit about what was happening in the European scene.
Yeah.
And certainly had to be reflected somewhere or another by Capra, which was probably Capra's antidote to the totalitarianism that
Exactly.
was sweeping Europe.
Yes, yes.
And good for Capra to get this out because in 1939 he's going to face competition
Right.
like he won't believe from Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind.
And Gone with the Wind.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad he got this out there because it had been just crushed
Right,
in
right.
1939.
Yeah.
All right, so Audrey, it's time for us to warn people that there's actually more to come, that we have more things to say about this topic.
We've got a little
Yeah,
bit to
so
unpack
You
here.
have to go to WCBE.org to the podcast experience, and you have to go to Double Take to catch us. Now, Audrey, what do you recommend to our audience for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
It is a must-see for everybody at least once. It's very nostalgic. It's a very, it's a hopeful, uplifting film,
Yes, it is.
and I think is as aw shucks and as gee whiz as it is. It's still a delight.
Yeah, and it's about as close to a G movie as you're ever going to see.
It is G plus.
I'm John DeSando.
Cinema, 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 cinema. Classics, let's go to the